They called him a cow in a horse's coat. A chubby Mustang with matted mane and sunken eyes that drew nothing but laughter. But as the Kansas dust swirled in the golden hush of sunset, an old man quietly stepped out from the crowd. No one knew why he raised his hand to bid on that horse, and no one imagined that his choice would bring an entire town to silence. Late summer sunlight stretched long across the tree-lined path leading into the livestock auction grounds on the outskirts of Cedar Hollow, Kansas. The air wasn't stifling that day, but it shimmered with a searing bronze glow. On the cracked earth, the sound of cowboy boots crunching gravel played like a familiar chorus, summer's own symphony for the region's biggest livestock auction of the year. They came from ranches 10, 15 miles away. Some drove rusted-out pickups. Others rode horseback. A few brought their teenage sons to show them how the world works. Wide-brimmed hats were the uniform, along with faded chambray shirts and eyes locked on the corrals, tracking each lot of livestock about to hit the ring. The air thickened with the auctioneer's shouts, the calls across the crowd, and the pungent mix of sweat, hay, and grilled meat. The noise held steady until Lot 47 walked into the arena. Then, suddenly, it turned into laughter. Boom. No one knew his real name, and no one cared to. To most of the crowd, he was just a horse, a big one. Too big. A chestnut Mustang cross with a tangled mane and a white blaze streaking down his face. His belly bulged like a water drum, his legs were thick as fence posts, and he moved with the sluggishness of something the earth itself was reluctant to let go of. "Dear God, did someone forget to bring the cow back to the barn?" someone shouted from the back, and laughter exploded. A group of men huddled by the iron railings, all wearing sun-faded hats and gripping cold beer cans. They laughed like it was the only entertainment worth the drive. Leading them was Ralph Colton, owner of the biggest cattle ranch west of town. Known for his beer belly, big mouth, and a daily dose of disdain for just about everyone. "Whoever's selling that slab of excess meat ought to pay someone to haul it off," Ralph barked, slicing the air with his words. More laughter followed. A banana peel rolled across the dusty auction floor and came to rest just in front of Boone's hoof. No one knew who threw it. No one asked. A voice somewhere muttered, "Maybe he brought it himself." Boone stood still. He didn't lift his head, didn't flinch, didn't back away. He just stood as if he'd seen this scene 1,000 times before. He was used to it. The scornful eyes, the biting laughter, the way people looked at him like a walking joke. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath the weight of a creature that knew it had no place here. At the edge of the stands, a man stood apart, hands tucked into the pockets of a worn canvas jacket, boots coated with dirt from backroad miles, hat brim shadowing most of his face. But his eyes, beneath that brim, never left Boone. Hank Dillard, 63 years old, lived on the southern edge of town, where the dirt road ended at a grove of dying eucalyptus. Folks hadn't seen much of him at gatherings since his wife, June, passed from cancer. He used to grow the finest horse hay in the region. Now he had a small patch of land, a weathered gray house, and a silence too deep for anyone to dare disturb. No one expected him to show up today, and even fewer expected what he did next. Toby, Hank's longtime friend and the one who'd driven him, nearly dropped his paper coffee cup when Hank quietly stepped out from the line and walked straight into the auction ring. He moved slowly, deliberately, like even the dust beneath his boots deserved to remember each step. The air shifted, the laughter stuttered, all the hats turned toward one man. Hank said nothing. He simply stopped a few paces in front of Boone and looked straight at him. Boone didn't flinch, didn't look away. He returned the gaze. It was the look of a creature who had been judged for its shape, rejected for not being fast enough, strong enough, beautiful enough. The look didn't plead. It didn't resist. It only asked in silence, "Do you see me?" And Hank nodded, softly, like recognizing an old tune. He raised a hand slowly, not to touch, just to let it hover near Boone's thick neck. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of horse dirt and time. Boone didn't move, only closed his eyes just for a second. Ralph scoffed, his voice slicing back into the moment. "What's that, Hank? Finally found yourself a dance partner your size?" A few chuckles followed, but weaker now. No one wanted to interrupt whatever strange thing was unfolding. Even the auctioneer stalled a beat before clearing his throat. "Lot 47, Mustang Cross, 8 years old. Vet says he's healthy, though, on the large side. Opening bid? Silence. Then Hank spoke. 600. The words fell light but landed like thunder in a dry field. Heads whipped around. Toby's face went pale. The auctioneer stammered. You mean $600? Hank didn't answer. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and brushed dust off his shirt front, like standing at a gravesite. Ralph arched an eyebrow. You seriously want that horse? Well, congrats. You just bought yourself 3 years of steak dinners. Hank didn't reply. He turned, gently placed a hand on Boone's neck, and as if scripted by something beyond them, Boone shifted, stepping forward to follow him. No second bids, no buzzer, no applause. Only dust rising behind two weary figures leaving the arena, and beneath that deep red sunset, the widowed man led the discarded horse away from the circle of mockery. Not because he saw value in the horse, but because he saw himself in eyes that had stopped expecting to be seen. Boone stepped off the trailer with the hesitation of a stranger arriving in a land neither hostile nor welcoming. The late afternoon breeze drifted through the weathered gray gate of the Dillard Ranch, carrying with it the scent of dry hay, old wood smoke, and the quiet hum of a place long unbothered by anything but the creak of hinges and the sputter of a water pump. Hank stood beside the trailer, holding an old frayed lead rope, one that once belonged to a different horse, in a different time. A time when the yard still echoed with the laughter of a woman and the steady clop of hooves on damp morning dirt. Boone lowered his head, brushed his nose across the freshly turned soil, then took in a long breath. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped down. Hank didn't tug, didn't speak. He simply walked beside him, steady and quiet, like two souls learning to walk in sync for the first time. Claire stood by the barn door, arms crossed, eyes narrowed in equal parts curiosity and disbelief. Hank's younger sister wasn't the emotional type, but when she got Hank's cryptic text, just 3 words, "I brought him home," she'd left her shift at the pharmacy midway and drove straight over. "You really paid $600 for that?" Claire asked, her voice heavy with disbelief. "I did," Hank replied, flat and firm. "People call that crazy." "Maybe." Claire squinted. "Are you doing this for June?" Hank stopped beside the old barn, its faded paint peeling, the tin roof curling at the edges, and the feed trough still painted white, hand-brushed by June herself. He opened the stall door without a word. Claire didn't need an answer. Boone walked in, this time without hesitation. He turned to look back at Hank, not fearful, not uncertain, just calm, still. Patient in a way that felt almost impossible. Toby returned with the truck, pulled up at the gate, and cut the engine. He stepped out, his face still shaded by confusion. "What the hell happened at that auction, Hank? Those fellas are still talking. Some say you had heat stroke." Hank carried a bucket of water over to the trough, poured it carefully. Didn't flinch, didn't answer. Toby stepped closer. "I saw the look on your face when you touched that horse, like you weren't even seeing him, like you were staring at something else entirely." "Maybe I was," Hank muttered, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Maybe I saw something they didn't." Toby sat on the porch step, pulling out a pouch of chew instead of lighting a cigarette. "You know, people think you've gone off the rails." "I know. Do you care?" Hank looked out past the paddock to the field grown high with grass that hadn't been mowed in over a year. "I used to. Not so much anymore." Boone stood still in the stall, eyes half shut. He didn't eat, didn't wander, just stood there, like he was waiting for something Hank hadn't yet named. That night, Hank sat alone on the porch steps, a tin mug of cold coffee in hand. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the night's sounds, crickets, leaves rustling, the soft creak of the porch swing still hanging from June's favorite corner. Boone remained upright in the stall, didn't lie down, didn't stir. A creature too large to ignore, too quiet to read. Toby had gone home at dusk. Claire had left a bag of oats and a few gentle warnings. Hank knew they cared, but none of them could feel what he felt. As the night deepened, Hank stood, walked across the yard, and stopped at the stall. Boone lifted his head and stepped closer. "I'm not even sure why I chose you," Hank murmured, voice low and slow. "Maybe because I saw something broken, like me. Maybe because you're the last thing I haven't let go of." Boone lowered his head, pressing gently into Hank's open palm. Hank closed his eyes. He could feel the horse's slow, steady breath, and for one fleeting moment, All the mockery, all the pity, and the bone-deep loneliness that had followed him these past 2 years just stopped. The next morning, Hank woke up earlier than usual, earlier than the rooster. He brewed a pot of coffee in the kitchen, his second cup since June passed. The first had been on the morning of her funeral. He'd left it by the window, as if waiting for her to come back. The second, he brought to the barn. Boone was still standing, still hadn't laid down once. "What are you afraid of?" Hank asked softly, opening the stall door. "Or maybe you're standing just to make sure I still get out of bed." No answer. But Boone stepped forward, rested his head gently across the stall door's wooden beam. Morning light slid in through the slats, casting a golden halo on his mane. Hank placed the coffee cup on the ledge, then sat down, his back against the wall, eyes fixed on the horizon just starting to blush with dawn. In this town, people never ran out of things to gossip about. And that day, the story was, old Hank Dillard, the hermit, spent $600 cash on a horse as big as a worn-out Chevy pickup. But to Hank, in that moment, none of it mattered, because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. And Boone, by some quiet miracle, wasn't either. The front gate let out a long groan, the kind made when heavy boots drag it sideways. Hank looked up from the hay he was forking into the trough. Boone turned his head too, both squinting into the midday light. A silver pickup had pulled into the yard. Not the truck Hank expected, not one he ever thought would return. The door opened. A tall, lean man stepped out, dark hair cropped short, scuffed leather boots, hands buried in the pockets of a weathered jacket. His eyes met Hank's for less than a second, then moved on. Cody Dillard, Hank's son. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 2 years, since June's funeral, where words had become weapons, and silence had killed whatever hadn't already been said. "Heard you bought a horse," Cody said flatly, like discussing egg prices at the co-op. Hank didn't answer. He set the pitchfork aside and pulled out his handkerchief. "Well, not exactly a horse," Cody added, his gaze drifting toward Boone in the stall. "Saw a picture on Facebook. Claire posted it? Maybe. Looks like a retired plow cow." Boone didn't move, but his eyes, calm, steady, unwavering, rested on Cody like a mirror. "What are you going to do with him?" Cody asked. "Yard ornament?" "I don't keep yard ornaments," Hank replied, brushing loose hay off the trough. "Then what?" "You think that horse is worthless, don't you?" Hank turned to face him, no anger in his voice, just a solid certainty, "because he doesn't fit someone's idea of what he's supposed to be." "I didn't say that, I just think maybe you're compensating for something." Silence, the kind that fills up barns and swallows years whole. Claire appeared behind Cody, carrying a cloth bag of medicine. "I asked him to come," she said. "You don't have to do this alone." Hank looked at her, then at Cody, then just nodded. That afternoon, all three worked on the barn roof. It was the same old barn Hank had built by hand with June, one nail, one board at a time. The last time 2 men had worked side by side in that space. Cody had been 17. No one said much. Claire planed the stall door. Cody replaced a wall plank. Hank took the ladder to the roof. But between the silences were sounds of something deeper, the weight of words never spoken. "Mom always liked this barn," Cody said as he reattached a door hinge. "Said it looked like something out of a storybook." "Yeah," Hank murmured, eyes still focused on the nail he was hammering. Later, Cody watched Boone resting in the shade. "He feels familiar," Cody said quietly. "The way he looks at people, like he's trying to read them, or maybe forgive them." "Horses don't hold grudges," Hank replied softly. "People do." That evening, Cody didn't leave. He sat on the porch steps with Hank, each holding a beer, keeping just enough distance that neither had to speak unless they wanted to. Boone lay nearby, eyes half closed, his bulk anchoring the space between them like a quiet sentinel. "Mom used to tell me not to fear failure," Cody said. "But after she died, I felt like I failed at everything." Hank didn't turn, but his voice came low and steady. "So did I." Night wind blew across the field, carrying the scent of scorched grass and memory. In the hush of 2 men who didn't know how to grieve out loud, Boone shifted slightly, lifting his head toward them. "You know," Hank said, not to the horse, not to the man beside him, but to something in between, "I'm not sure if I saved you, or if you're the one keeping me from disappearing." Cody looked over. His expression softened. "Maybe both." The next morning, Hank stepped into the barn. Boone was no longer standing. He was lying down for the first time, legs tucked under, head upright, as if waiting to greet the day's first companion. Cody was already up, carrying coffee out to the porch. "I've never seen him lie down," Hank said, eyes fixed on Boone. "It means he feels safe," Cody replied. And in that moment, no more words were needed. Hank understood. The space between father and son had grown smaller than either of them realized. The September sky shifted slowly, like wrinkles deepening on the face of someone who had lived too long with silence. The breeze that drifted in from the backfields carried the scent of damp earth and fresh-cut grass, brushing past the porch where Hank Dillard sat, coffee gone cold in his hand before he realized. Boone lay beneath the old eucalyptus tree, the very spot where June used to sit and read on warm summer afternoons. He wasn't sleeping, just still. Head raised slightly, those deep brown eyes locked toward the porch, as if waiting for something Hank had never quite said. Hank had grown used to the presence. Boone didn't ask questions, didn't need reasons, didn't press. He simply existed. Every morning, every evening. Like he understood that what Hank needed wasn't someone to talk to, but someone to stay, to keep him rooted in the present, instead of slipping back into the hollow nights beside a chair that would never be filled again. Cody had returned to his own place after 3 days of fixing stalls, cleaning troughs, and patching the northern fence. He left a note behind. "I'll be back this weekend. Boone makes it easier to breathe." Claire still stopped by every afternoon, sometimes bringing feed, sometimes ointment, and sometimes just an excuse. "Just checking if you're still alive," she'd say with a crooked grin. But Hank knew. The one thing keeping him waking up each day wasn't in any feedback or sibling check-in. It was Boone. One late afternoon, Hank sat inside the barn next to Boone. He sat on an overturned bucket, his shoulders slightly hunched, holding an old horsebrush in his weathered hand. Boone lay calmly beside him, breathing slow and deep. Hank began brushing his thick coat with quiet care, as if combing dust off a memory long buried. "She used to hum in the mornings," Hank said, not to anyone in particular. "That melody, it had no name, just a short little thing, over and over, but I remember it more than any song." Boone didn't move, just blinked. "I used to think she hummed to pass the time while brewing coffee, but now I think maybe she hummed to stay alive." Hank paused, his hand tightening around the brush. "And when she stopped humming, I knew everything had changed." The wind slipped through the gaps in the barn siding, taking his unfinished words with it, leaving behind a silence that weighed more than grief. That evening, Claire returned, carrying a small battery-powered speaker and a USB drive. "I found it in June's old music box," she said. "It's a voice recording, just her humming, not much, but enough to remember." Hank didn't say a word. He took the little machine, turning it over in his hands like a delicate heirloom. Then he rose from the porch and walked toward the barn. Boone was already standing, as if sensing something was coming. Hank pressed play. A woman's voice, soft and faint, spilled into the dusk. Not words, just melody. Thin as spider silk, yearning and tender. The breeze caught it, let it ripple through the slats and rafters. Boone's ears twitched. He stilled, then stepped forward, lowering his massive head onto Hank's shoulder. A man who had lost everything. A horse once mocked as useless, and a melody with no lyrics left behind by a woman 2 years in the ground. That night, Hank cried. Not loud, not broken, just quiet tears, the kind that fall like dew on old hay. Boone didn't leave. He stood beside him the entire night, guarding a dream Hank no longer dared to dream. The next morning brought a light drizzle. Not heavy, but enough to wet the porch and weigh down the grass. Hank stepped outside. Boone was already there, soaked but unmoved, standing just beyond the stall watching the house. He didn't whinny, didn't paw, just looked, and Hank understood. He crossed the yard, stepped into the barn, and pulled a rain sheet from the hook. He draped it gently over Boone's back. "You don't need this," Hank whispered. "But I need to know. I can still do something for someone." Boone dipped his head, touched Hank's shoulder softly, then turned and walked slowly toward the old fence facing the autumn-tinted field. That evening, when Claire came by, she noticed something new. Boone no longer rested near the barn. He now stood near the porch window, the exact place where June used to sip her morning coffee, like he had chosen a new shelter, a new view, a new place to anchor himself. "Do you know what he's doing?" Claire asked, standing beside Hank, a bag of medicine in her hands. Hank looked at the horse, then shook his head. "He's standing where she used to sit," Claire said softly. "Maybe. He knows." Hank didn't reply, but he placed a hand over his heart, as if trying to hold something inside that threatened to spill out. That night, Cody came back, unannounced. He brought an old photo frame. Inside was a picture of June standing beside an aging horse, not Boone, but with the same eyes, steady, deep, and unwavering. "Found this in Mom's keepsake box," Cody said. "She once told me, horses never leave people, not unless people give up first." Hank placed the photo on the side table by the window. Then he looked out to where Boone stood beneath the porch light. "We're not giving up," Hank said quietly. Boone lowered his head, as if nodding. The moon rose slowly like a silver scar etched across a dark sky, casting its pale glow across the Dillard Ranch. Boone lay near the porch, right where June once loved to sit and read. Cody had stayed the night, while Claire was working a late shift at the pharmacy. Hank remained awake, seated in the kitchen with the window cracked open, listening to the sounds of night. His fingers circled the rim of a cold coffee mug, eyes fixed on the soft porch light. At exactly 12:30 a.m., a sound ripped through the silence, hooves pounding, wood splintering, and a sharp, guttural whinny choked halfway through. Hank sprang to his feet. The front door flew open. He burst outside with a flashlight in hand, boots still half on. The paddock gate was busted wide open, hinges torn off. A large wooden beam lay shattered across the ground. Boone stood there, blood streaking his side, scratches along his back, red burns around his neck where a rope had seared the skin. But he stood, not collapsed, not fleeing. Breathing hard, eyes blazing like twin coals in the dark. "Boone!" Hank shouted, falling to his knees beside him. He swept the flashlight across the yard, deep tire tracks etched into wet ground. Someone had tried to haul Boone off in a truck, but he'd resisted. Near the barn, remnants of singed rope smoldered, and the stench of gasoline still hung in the air. Cody rushed out behind him, unable to speak. "They tried to take him," Hank muttered. "They couldn't get him at the auction, so they came back in the night." Boone staggered but didn't fall. Cody dashed inside to grab towels, antiseptic, and a heat lamp. Hank rose, his hand trembling as he laid it on Boone's shoulder. "You did good, son. You did real good." At nearly 2 a.m., Sheriff Bill McCormick arrived. Older than Hank by a few years, round-bellied with graying hair but sharp-eyed. He examined Boone, the broken gate, the tire tracks, then exhaled slowly. "I'll file the report," he said. "But you know how this goes. No cameras out here. No witnesses, and no one heard anything besides you." "So nothing'll happen?" Cody asked, his voice cracked with fury. "I'll alert the highway patrol," Bill said. "But cases like this, they don't usually go far." Claire showed up minutes later, followed by Dylan, her nephew, a senior vet student still in sweats and a hoodie, hair tied up in a rush. "I've got antibiotics," Dylan said, unloading his kit. "Let me work." Boone stayed still as Dylan cleaned the wounds, stitched the deepest one, and administered anti-inflammatories. Every time the needle pierced skin, Boone barely flinched. No kicks, no pulls, no protest. "He knows we're helping him," Dylan murmured. Cody stood by, gently cradling Boone's head as if he were holding the hand of someone returned from the dead. "He could have hurt someone tonight," Cody said quietly. "He didn't. He chose to stay." Hank overheard. He looked at Boone and whispered, almost to himself, "That's real strength." News of the attack spread quickly the next morning. Gone were the mockeries. No more banana peels or jokes about cow horses. Instead, people came with fresh hay, oats, bandages, and most of all, quiet apologies. An elderly couple left a bag of apples by the gate. A grade schooler drew a picture of Boone with wings and taped it to the fence. A stranger painted a wooden sign and nailed it to Hank's front post. "You mess with one, you face us all." Claire traced the words with her fingers. "For the first time," she said, "this town is standing with you." Hank didn't speak, but his eyes glistened. By dusk, Hank sat beside Boone, not on a bench, not above him, but on the bare ground. Back to the barn wall, shoulder to shoulder. "You didn't fight back," Hank murmured. "You didn't run, you just stood until I found you." Boone stirred slightly, then rested his massive head against Hank's shoulder. The evening deepened into night. No music, no applause. Just an old man beside a horse once considered worthless, both scarred, both stubborn, both choosing to stand still when the world tried to bring them down. That night, Cody sat on the porch, scrolling through messages on his phone. The post about Boone had been shared over 3,000 times in local groups. The gentle giant who stood his ground. Messages poured in. A woman from Missouri wrote, "My son suffers from severe anxiety. After reading Boone's story, he asked to meet the horse. He said, if he's not afraid, then I don't have to be." A therapy center in another state requested an interview. A horse rescue nonprofit wanted to visit. A local radio station invited Hank on air. Cody read each line, his face filled with quiet awe. "Dad," he said, "I think we did something right." Hank looked up at the stars. Wind rustled the grass. Boone still stood nearby, his shadow stretched long across the damp field, etched into the earth. "It wasn't us who saved him," Hank said. "It was him," reminding everyone what it means to not give up on something just because it doesn't look right. That morning, Hank was sweeping the yard when Cody stepped out of the house, phone clutched tightly in one hand. "Dad, it's a call from Missouri. The Equine Therapy Center. They want to talk to you. About Boone." Hank looked up, pausing mid-sweep. Sunlight filtered through the porch awning, catching the faded lines of his checkered shirt. He took the phone, hesitated a moment, then pressed accept. A woman's voice came through, warm, calm, and clear. "Good morning, Mr. Dillard. I'm Karen Tillman from Healing Hooves Sanctuary in northern Missouri. We just read the story about Boone. And I'll be honest, we've never seen this kind of public response before." Hank stayed silent, listening. "We work with veterans, children with PTSD, and individuals on the autism spectrum. Horses are powerful healing tools, and based on everything we've seen and read, Boone has a rare gift. He stays still when people need stillness the most. That's not something you train into a horse." Karen paused, then continued. "If you're open to it, we'd like to come to Cedar Hollow to meet Boone. And if things go well, we'd love to bring him to the sanctuary." That afternoon, Hank sat alone in the barn, watching Boone lying quietly on fresh straw. The wounds were mostly healed now, but Hank knew some pain didn't live in flesh. Boone remained silent, always present, always gentle, a giant shadow that asked for nothing and gave more than words ever could. Claire brought over a thermos of coffee and a cornbread muffin she'd just baked. They sat together, wordless for a while. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. "I think you should consider it. Boone? He's not just ours anymore. He could help a lot of people." Hank nodded faintly, eyes still on the horse. "I know," he said softly. "It's just, after June died, I promised myself I wouldn't get attached to anything that could disappear again." Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe what she wanted wasn't for you to stop loving, but to keep loving, even if it means letting go." That evening, Cody joined Hank in the living room. Hank was holding an old photo album. Inside was a picture of June with her arms wrapped around a horse named Daisy. Not Boone, but with the same eyes, calm, steady, and endlessly deep. "You know," Cody said, hesitating, "when I was a kid, Mom once told me every horse has a soul, and if you're quiet enough, they'll tell you what it's carrying, just like Boone." Hank smiled faintly. "Your mother used to say that every time I threatened to sell a horse because we couldn't afford the hay." They both laughed. But then Cody's tone turned serious. "Dad, maybe what Mom left behind wasn't the house or the land. Maybe it was Boone." Hank looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she taught us to forgive. Boone showed up when our family was falling apart. Maybe sending him to Missouri isn't an ending. Maybe it's what keeps us whole." That night it rained again, soft and steady. Hank couldn't sleep. He pulled on his old raincoat and walked to the barn once more. Boone was already up. No lights, no sound, just waiting. "They say you can help people heal," Hank said, stepping closer. "But they don't know what you healed in me." Boone didn't move, but when Hank reached up and touched his mane, the horse lowered his head, gentle, respectful. "I'm not holding you back out of selfishness," Hank whispered. "I'm just afraid of being alone again." A drop of rain slid down Hank's cheek. Or maybe it wasn't rain. "I won't stop you. If you want to go, if you think they need you more, go." Boone took a long breath, then stood quietly beside him for the rest of the night. The next morning, Hank called Karen back. "You can come to Cedar Hollow anytime," he said. "Boone's ready, and so am I." That morning, sunlight slanted through the old oaks at the front of the Dillard Ranch, casting a golden hue across the worn wooden fence. Down the dirt road leading into the property, a cream-colored truck rolled in slowly. On its side, bold letters read, "Whispering Valley Sanctuary, a place to begin again." Hank stood on the porch in his weathered coat, wearing the old cowboy hat that had once belonged to June. Claire and Cody had been up since dawn, packing Boone's favorite hay into small bundles and folding a wool blanket Hank used to throw over him on cold nights. The trailer came to a stop. Karen stepped out with two staff members in soft gray uniforms. Their faces were calm, but their eyes shimmered with emotion as they looked toward the far corner of the yard, where Boone stood quietly, without a lead rope, facing them as if he already knew. "Mr. Dillard," Karen greeted. "Just call me Hank," he replied, his voice steady, low, and warm. "We've brought everything we need," she said gently. "But if you'd prefer, we'll let Boone walk onto the trailer on his own terms." Hank nodded, then turned to Boone and raised both hands, just like he did every morning when easing him into the day. "Come on, partner, it's time." No halter, no prodding. Boone stepped forward. Each stride was heavy, measured, as if counting every inch of the soil beneath him. When he passed Claire, he dipped his head. When he reached Cody, he inhaled gently into his outstretched hand, a brief, quiet exchange filled with something deeper than words. Then he stood before the trailer. No one spoke. The whole town, it seemed, held its breath. A dog down the road stopped barking. Even the wind seemed to hush. Boone climbed into the trailer. He didn't look back. Karen closed the door, leaving a small back window open. Claire stepped forward and gently placed something inside. A worn photo frame of Hank and June in their younger days, standing beside a horse named Daisy at their first county fair. "He might not understand the picture," Claire whispered, "but he'll feel the love in it." Karen turned to Hank. "We'll keep you updated regularly, and if you ever want to visit—" "I'm not sure I've got the strength to drive that far anymore," Hank said with a soft smile, "but I'll be watching. Always." The truck pulled away. Its tires rolled through dry leaves and Kansas dust, kicking up the last warmth of summer. Boone was no longer the horse everyone once laughed at. He had become a symbol of something quietly extraordinary. 2 weeks later, on the local radio show Cedar Hollow Voice, a familiar voice echoed across Kansas, Missouri, and even parts of Arkansas. "My name is Hank Dillard, and I'd like to tell you about a horse named Boone." At 7 p.m. sharp, the story aired. In it, Boone wasn't a horse bought out of pity. He was the soul that held a broken family together, a stillness that helped the world catch its breath. A week after that, Hank received a letter from Missouri, handwritten in uneven lines, clearly from a child. "Dear Mr. Hank, my name is Miles. I met Boone yesterday. He didn't move when I walked up. I hugged him, and for the first time I told my mom I'm okay now." She cried. "So did I. Thank you for sharing, Boone. He is strong." Hank read the letter 3 times. Each time, he folded it carefully and placed it in the left chest pocket of his shirt. That evening, he sat alone on the porch, eyes fixed to the north, where Missouri stretched far beyond sight but never beyond reach. The wind swept across the high grass, rustling the late wildflowers like a farewell from summer itself. And Hank whispered, barely audible, "You weren't just a horse, Boone. You were the bridge we all needed to cross the hurt." And somewhere far away, under a different roof, Boone still stood, like a light that never went out, waiting for someone who needed it most. If you believe that even a horse once mocked can become a source of hope for an entire community, drop a 1 in the comments below. And if you believe that sometimes what we truly need isn't strength, but a heart that knows how to be patient and forgive, type 0 to let us know you're still with us. Boone and Hank's story is just one of many powerful journeys between humans and horses that we've shared, and many more are still to come. So hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because you won't want to miss the next story that just might move your soul. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary things come from the ones the world almost forgot.